Malcolm Mann, and we will hopefully get a conversation going. At the moment, do bear with me, as always at the start of these, because these seem to start earlier than I anticipate. There is a bit of housekeeping that I need to quickly do. So please bear with me. I do apologise, and hopefully, I apologise for the hair getting increasingly long. It's it's lockdown. That's basically it. It's lockdown, and it's starting to look quite untidy. I'm looking forward to going to the barbers when I can, and yes, getting it all cut. Well, not all of it, but obviously enough for it to be tidy. And yes, here we go. At 1929. Yeah. Hang on. Hopefully, I'm now waiting for Malcolm, who will probably be on the dot like Warren Morgan was last night in our discussion on the Trump impeachment, where Trump was acquitted. And obviously, we've heard some more news since then because he and Mitch McConnell have had a big, had a bit of a spat. But let's leave politics aside. Some of you viewers are not here to hear politics. You're here to listen about the Fellowship of the Ring. So, yes, and just waiting to... I've already started. Sorry about that. And yes, here we go. Malcolm has entered the waiting room. Okay, here we go. Hi, good evening, Malcolm. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello. It's been a while since we've had actual, well, I'd say face-to-face discussion, but how's things?
Settled. I had tea a bit later than normal this evening.
Yeah.
And I was wolfing it down.
Yes.
And I was going really well to almost the last fork. And
I admit, when I was in the last...
I hope you appreciate the sacrifice I was prepared to make.
That's fine. I've been in a similar situation. I was literally wolfing down my evening meal whilst doing the final preparations for this. So,
right.
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, I made it. I'm here, and I'm happy to see you.
And you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So, 20 years. 20
years. Who can believe it? I'd entirely forgotten until I saw it mentioned recently, and then your reminder. But gosh, it seems a while ago. I was thinking about it earlier, and I remembered seeing the initial website for Fellowship of the Ring, and it was just a website placeholder, and it was so dull looking. I remember it just being lots of green and a bit of text. And I thought at the time, well, this doesn't look very promising. But I didn't realize that, okay, it's just there to get the thing established before they give us the real website. And boy, was that much better along with the films. And the first film especially.
Well, the first...
20 years. Here's to them.
I do love all three films, and as in all three books, but the first one has always been a particular favorite. I think because it hit the ground running, and in both the book and the film, we need to emphasize, I think, here that there is a difference.
Big differences. It's very possible, and many are like this, that they fans of the book have nothing to do with the pictures, which is fine. But I mean, it's an inevitability of cinema that they they can't put everything that's in the book onto the screen.
Yeah.
I think it's Christopher Tolkien who said that it's unfilmable. I mean, as a whole, the book probably is, but yeah, I think Peter Jackson did as good a job as anyone could have, given the limitations of the form of the medium.
Yes.
But yeah, very different beasts to be treated very differently. It's really unfair to judge either by the standards of the other, the book by the film, or vice versa, especially. It's, I suppose you'd say it's an adaptation of the book. It's probably has to be a bit looser than that, almost as if it's a film inspired by the book. Because if you say adaptation, it's just too close a link, almost. But yeah. For my part, I like both of them. I much prefer the books, but it's great seeing them on the screen. I haven't had the problem in the 20 years since of associating the actors with many of the roles, with the possible exception of Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn, because he looks so the part.
Yes.
But I mean, even so, I respect people who don't like the films, as long as they don't try to put people who do down. And if they prefer the book, that's fine too.
Well, I mean, it's always a big issue, isn't it? It's as much an issue as anyone wants to make it. But it's always been seen as an issue with any novel or any work of fiction when it's been adapted onto the screen. I've only, out of all the books I've read, and I'm including the ones I've skimmed through, but this one I'm about to refer to, I actually did read from cover to cover. Only one book, I've only ever seen one film that is so loyal to the book, page by page, it's untrue. And I'd read the book first, and that was Where Eagles Dare.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes. Right. But I later found that Alistair MacLean wrote a novel around the same time he was writing the screenplay.
Oh, okay. So yeah, very close relationship in that case.
Exactly. I did think they did quite well with the films. Was how they were very good at the visual. I mean, it sounds obvious, but if you read the books before seeing the films, or if anyone's read them, it's amazing what's in your mind's eye, as it were.
Yeah.
Transposed on film, which says a lot about Tolkien's descriptive powers, but also how Peter Jackson was clearly determined to be faithful to that.
Yeah, Tolkien's second to none when it comes to descriptive powers. I remember my brother, when we were younger, saying one of the reasons he didn't like the books was that Tolkien insisted on giving everything a name, even the last blade of grass. Yes. He would have given it his ancestry if he could have. But yeah, Peter Jackson, the story is solid, taken on its own terms. I think the story is very solid, which is, for me, unusual for a Hollywood picture, because the quality, the quality of the production values, are nearly always absolutely 100%, can't be faulted. But they so often fall down on the script. And I think the film taken by itself, I think it's a pretty solid script. I would not compare it to Tolkien's work, because that's when I think it would fall over. It's a film, it's a story that needs to do what it must in order to get its target audience in, which were teenagers, 20-somethings, etc. Back in 2000 or 2001. But yeah, I really like the story. It's always a problem of being pulled like a tractor beam back to this novel. Say, well, they didn't put in Tom Bombadil. Actually, it's things like that. I can understand why they missed him out, and certain other aspects as well. But I would applaud them for that. give them a little leeway with some of the characters. I'm thinking here especially of Pippin and Merry. Perhaps they could have done a bit more, a bit different there. But I don't think in that case, going back to the source material would have been a good idea. They'd be too similar. And in the film, they needed to have characters who either represent different things or very different types of character, so that they don't become very samey and the audience just drifts over them because they're all like each other. Three people I think wrote it: Peter Jackson and his wife, is it Philippa Boyens, and someone else. I can't remember the names, but I think certainly a lot of effort went into it, and it paid off. Whatever faults it has, I think what they get right, Aragorn's nobility, even if he must be a bit uncertain in a very 20th century way, Frodo's nobility as well. These things that they get right, Gandalf's character as well, they get more right, I think, than they get wrong. And that's why the film hits the ground running, as you say. They get it right from the beginning. And whenever they leave the path a bit, by that point, it doesn't really matter, because the strength of the story is now established, and they're able to keep it going quite marvelously over the three pictures. You would have thought at least the second might be a bit, because it's the second, a bit here and there, but even that, I think is a strong movie. But it's very good narrative, unusual for Hollywood.
I had a discussion on here. I think it was with Lisa Funnell, from the James Bond universe.
Oh yeah.
Discussions, and we were talking about. It was in December, about the 4 Bond films. The 4 Bond films. The 4. Sorry, my brain is starting to get scrambled. The 4 Bond actors who died in the previous 12 months. Rick, Michael Lonsdale, Sean Connery, and Honor Blackman. And the reason I mention is because she said, I think when we slightly deviated, that I think it was her, and if you're watching, Lisa, and I've got it wrong, I apologise, but that she had watched the Lord of the Rings films back to back.
Oh, yes. On one day, a binge in one day.
Yeah, it was a
that's top effort. I've never managed that.
Yeah.
Not with the extended editions, I think.
Yes.
I can't remember if the cinema ones, but a theatrical release. But that's a few hours. I'd love to do that at some point if I could give myself a day off from everything else. But yeah, I mean, I wonder what I would get out of that other than a bit of backache and tiredness.
I'm thinking you hobbits when you walk out the house.
I'm envious that she's able to do that. I'm not sure I could.
I think it was a one-off, and I think it was Lisa who told me I would need to look at the program again, but I seem to have a memory for that.
Right. So top effort. I mean, I'm hopelessly bad. The reason I don't think I could do it is I'm very bad at binging. I like, if anything, I like doing the opposite of drawing films or TV series that I like out. So some people can watch a series in a night or two, and I don't want it to end, so I'll just watch it very slowly. And I'd probably end up doing the same with The Lord of the Rings, although never say never, now that the idea is planted in my head, Inception-like.
I do find it works with me if I'm watching, recently, obviously they've been doing huge box set type things on the BBC, ITV and Channel 4 online channels, as well as the ones you get like BritBox and Netflix.
Yeah.
And they recently, BBC iPlayer got hold of Zapped, which is a fantasy comedy. It kind of does to fantasy what Red Dwarf does to science fiction.
Okay.
and they got it from Dave. Dave did 3 series.
Right.
So there were 15 episodes, and I found I was watching them over a 2-day period. So I
Wow.
could watch 2 episodes, possibly 3 back to back, but I couldn't do any more than that. But
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
come back to them after a few hours or after a day. I would get back to them. So I think it was no, I say it's about a 4-day period. I saw 15 half-hour episodes.
Yeah.
So
On another tangent, would you ever consider binge watching all the Bond films by the same Bond actor, like all of Roger Moore's or Connery's
I
or
feared it.
Daniel Craig's?
If my face kind of went out because I thought at first you were talking about every single one.
That
Because
would be quite something.
it would take my maths is not brilliant, but off the top of my head, I think would take about half a week. But
Probably.
oh, my goodness, that would be incredible. But binge watching all of Roger Moore, no, I could anyone can binge watch Timothy Dalton, but
Well,
um,
Dalton and
Piers
uh, Thingamajig.
Lazenby.
Sorry?
Lazenby. Well,
Was
we always
Lazenby, yeah.
watch Lazenby, don't we? But yeah, Pierce Brosnan, I think, would be the furthest I'd go. If it was Roger Moore, Sean Connery, it would have to be half-half. But
I'd love to do, if I could do it, I'd love to do Daniel Craig's, because I think that would make the most sense, because the films are, in a sense, sequels
yeah,
or chapters of a book in a way that the others aren't.
yeah.
But I mean, come the moment, any of them would be worth it. Half of Sean Connery's, say, one day, and then the other half on another day.
Which leads me to another point of the Fellowship of the Ring that I want to touch on
Yeah,
is the cast. And sometimes when people discuss the cast of the Lord of the Rings or the
yeah.
Fellowship of the Ring, they don't just talk about how the cast came about, but who didn't get the roles. Because as it is sometimes in the film world, who didn't get the roles means as much as I mean. There's the story apparently, and I've been trying to find which part he got because for years people thought it was Gandalf, and
Right.
he said he didn't. He said it was one of the other parts, but apparently Tom Baker was offered a role in this.
Tom Baker.
Tom
Right, I
Baker
didn't know that.
refused because he realised it would spend about a whole year in New Zealand, and he wasn't prepared to do that. I mean, I don't know whether one of his sons lived at the time in New Zealand, but I think going to New Zealand was one thing. Spending a whole year there was, was something else. So I would love to know who Tom Baker would have played. Apparently, it wasn't Gandalf.
Right.
Uh,
Hmm.
but also everyone, I'm sort of looking at the list here. But with Gandalf, Sean Connery was approached, and
Yeah,
this partly had a hand in his career ending, because he was a few years before, if you know, he did that awful film, The Avengers.
I've not seen it.
You haven't
I
seen it?
saw Calvin Dyson's review,
Yes, and
and I was rather glad I hadn't seen it.
I've seen it, and Kelvin Dyson is spot on that. I saw it. I didn't see it cinema. I saw it as soon as it came out on, I think, what was then video cassette.
Yeah,
And I was, as a fan of the Avengers. For those who are watching who are of a certain generation, we are talking about the film and the franchise based around the 60s TV series about a slightly surreal story based around agents in the British government.
it's so disappointing because Ray Fiennes, who I love to pieces, was
Yeah,
in the starring role, and I can't believe he did a dud film.
that's true. But the reason I mention this is Sean Connery was wasn't sure about the script, but obviously the popularity of the original TV series and everything, he was like, okay, we'll work with it. And of course, things got, found himself in a mess. Then he did Entrapment, which did well. Playing by Heart, Entrapment, they did well. Finding Forrester, they did well.
I love that film.
He was then offered the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship Ring, and he said, I didn't understand it. he didn't understand the script or anything. So, and he was offered Gandalf, and he refused on that. And then he said he saw it on the cinema, and he still didn't understand it.
I admire his honesty. It would have been easy to come up with an excuse for missing a role of the lifetime.
Exactly.
Lifetime, but yeah, fronted up. I didn't get it. Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone.
Cut to 2 years later, he was offered the lead role of Alan Quatermain in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He didn't understand it or wasn't sure about it, but given the success of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he thought, well, I don't want to really make this mistake. And of course, that flopped.
Oh, okay.
So I seem to remember reading someone that Connery, perhaps it was around about that time, he, apart from doing that film Sir Billy the Vet and doing the voice to the video game of From Russia with Love,
yeah,
that was it. That was his career over after that. And you wonder whether he was starting to question his judgment. But it is. But how would you have felt about Connery playing Gandalf?
That's a tough question because Ian McKellen played him so well. It's hard to imagine anyone else doing it. I don't think his accent would have been a problem. I could easily get by him as is he Lithuanian or Estonian in The Hunt for Red October?
Lithuanian. I'm surprised to remember that, but he is Lithuanian.
I mean, he's so good in the role. The way he speaks doesn't matter.
Yes.
So that wouldn't have been a problem.
The only time I've ever known Sean Connery use an accent other than his own was when he was playing Bond, pretending to be a Dutchman in Diamonds Are Forever. That's the only time where, it's like, hello, bitter, you speak English, I speak English, who is your floor? That's a British Dutch accent. But that's the only time I've ever known Connery to use an accent other than his own in film.
Right.
Really.
Did it matter?
No, but I mean that says something about him, as you said, with his films and the.
Well, accents. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. Red October, I don't think it did, but I think of Oliver Stone's Alexander film, Alexander the Great film, where he used accents there to denote social class. So Alexander, Colin Farrell, Irish. There are other posh Macedonians who are English. And then there are slightly lower posh people who affect Irish accents as well, and so on and on. And Angelina Jolie has a vaguely East European accent for Alexander's mother, I guess because she's from Epirus. It didn't work in that picture. It was too grating. But then it had a weakness of a weak story. The script wasn't all that as good as it could have been. But it's hit and miss as to whether that works. To go back to the original question,
yes,
I think it's hard to imagine Connery as Gandalf, but considering the magic that films can work with actors to turn them into their character, I have a feeling that he could have easily passed muster as either Gandalf or as Saruman.
Yes, and Connery could play villains. He didn't play them.
Yeah, I mean,
he could.
Yeah. I'm hard pressed to think of a villainous film that he's in. But,
the Avengers.
I haven't seen
that, but no, I remember many years ago. It's probably the same for you because we're of similar age. BBC Two would show around after 6 p.m. They would show a low-budget Tarzan film from the 50s or 60s.
Oh right, yeah.
And every so often, among the films they showed was one called Tarzan's Greatest Adventure, and Sean Connery was part of a ruthless gang led by I've forgotten his name. He was in he played a guy who got who ended up having to be left behind in the Guns of Navarone.
Oh dear. It'll come back.
It'll come. I can't believe it. That's the second time I've had my brain's got scrambled this evening. It's not good. I had less than 7 hours sleep last night. Now,
well, fair enough.
It's my feeble excuse.
It's a long day.
It was Anthony something or another. Oh god. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, mentioned Sean Connery. Patrick Stewart was also offered for the role of Gandalf. And
Oh, really? Interesting.
um,
Um, yeah, I could more easily imagine Sean Connery, but he's a fine actor, Patrick Stewart.
mm,
These guys, they could have done any of the older
yeah,
lords of the West, Denethor
yeah,
or Theoden,
yes.
and absolutely nailed it. Saruman as well.
Mm,
They're that good an actor, a lot of them. But yeah, Sean Connery.
yeah.
I mean, I don't regret Ian McKellen playing him. He did so well. But yeah, that's quite a thought. As imagine seeing Sean Connery there. I'm glad of the guys we did get though. I'm not sure anyone was really miscast in the film.
No, and
Which,
some
just quickly to go to, speaking of miscasting,
yeah,
I heard vaguely at the time that the film came out that Viggo Mortensen had been hired at the very last minute or after the last minute to play Aragorn
yeah.
because they didn't like the guy who was going to play him, Stuart Townsend. It took me years to find out anything more about this guy. I didn't even see a picture of him.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Jack realised he was too young.
Too young, yeah, perhaps he was. But again, Viggo Mortensen played him so well. It's hard to imagine anyone else doing it. But he must have been really much too young if they couldn't get the makeup right for him.
Well, it was filmed from late 1999 to late 2000.
Uh-huh.
I remember he's just looking him up now. Born 15th of December 1972.
Oh, he's younger than me.
So yeah, he's 20. Aragorn strikes me as someone who's from the age somewhere between 35 and 45. Well, I mean,
double.
We see it today. I mean, in Tolkien's world, that it could be 120 because of the way. I mean,
he's of Numenorean blood, and so he ages more slowly, like the elves, I guess.
Yes.
So I think in the film, in Two Towers, he tells Eowyn that he's in his 80s, 85 or 88, something like that.
Right.
I think that's how it is in the book as well, because they refer to him fighting for Theoden's father. I'm pretty sure that's in the book. I have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure.
The only famous actor I could think of who would be about 85 in 1999 was Alec Guinness, and I don't think he would be right casting for.
He would have been a touch too old.
Yeah, and he would have died during film. He died in the summer of 2000.
Yeah,
I remember, so he died during filming as well.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about sometimes, like I say, you've got to get rid of all total authenticity for.
Yeah, one iconic character in your career is entirely enough.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, but anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alec Guinness, if he'd been a bit younger, would have been. I don't know if he would have understood the books either.
I think he was more of a Gandalf, was it, or Saruman?
Well, we say that because of Ben Kenobi, I think. But I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
But I don't know who else he could have played.
No.
I don't think he would have been right for Denethor.
No.
Perhaps too cerebral, but then perhaps I'm thinking of George Smiley. Yeah.
Apparently, Daniel Day-Lewis and Russell Crowe were considered for Aragorn as well.
Daniel Day-Lewis would be great.
And Russell Crowe turned it down because he thought the role in Gladiator was similar.
I mean, similar in that fantasy.
Yeah.
That's about it. Maximus is entirely unrelated to Aragorn in any other way.
It would be a bit of a. It would be neither of us would, but if I were in his place and I had been cast in either of those, it would have been a wrench to say no to either of them. But I think I'd have ultimately have gone for Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think I would have found it more satisfying.
You mean if you were an actor?
If I were an actor,
right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's solid. I think the role to challenge oneself in would be Gollum, the voice of Gollum. How do you make him evil, and then coming back from that before he ultimately falls? Again, that would be a challenge, and all just with your voice.
Andy
Because
Serkis's whole career has been based around that. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
yeah,
His whole
I mean, he's played it really well. He did a cracking job, by all accounts, with reading the Hobbit book last year. He's a fine actor.
Yeah.
That's why. So fair play to him. He's gone on to do some other really good stuff as well, I think. But I have to say, if I was going to get Russell Crowe into Lord of the Rings, I think he would have made a good Boromir.
Yeah.
I think that would have suited his face and his personality on screen. He could have brought the darkness to that without being so dark.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd be better than Sean Bean, but I think that's a role he could have played really well. Yeah.
One of the things I did notice about the casting is we talked about, roles there were some who were rejected for roles but came back in other things, and one of them was Billy Connolly was considered for the role of Gimli, but of course,
really?
but of course they decided they wouldn't go. They wouldn't go with him in that, but of course he turned up later as Dane Second Ironfoot in the Hobbit trilogy. In the battle.
Well, I've seen the first two.
You haven't seen the last.
I'm not the third. I saw the first one
Yeah.
in the cinema and hated it. The way it was filmed, I think the frame rate was faster than normal, so it looked like you were actually at the window watching what was outside. It looked completely like that. And I thought, that's just so bad for a fantasy film. It's too immediate. I need a certain distance because this is a myth, a fantasy story. So I took my shoes off and shook the dust off and went off home in a stomp. And it wasn't until I met someone who loves the Hobbit films that when I was walking the Camino the other year, that I said, okay, I'll give it a go. I liked it a bit better the second time round on the video because it's the normal frame rate. It's still a bit puffed out somewhat, but second time round, that in the second film, there was more than enough to keep going with them. But yeah, the third, Dane and the rest, I've not seen, so I can't speak to Billy Connolly's performance just yet. But hopefully it's on one of the streaming channels, I think Netflix, or so I'll be able to watch it through them and round it all off until Amazon hit us with the Second Age, whenever that starts.
Yes.
So yeah, but Billy Connolly, he would make a great voice of one of the not cartoon, animated, or those voice characterization. Or he would have been good as Beorn. He's got more than enough hair.
I did think. I did also see in the cast Sylvester McCoy was considered for Bilbo Baggins, and ended up playing.
I think I might have preferred him there than Radagast.
Yes.
I'm not sure what I was expecting with Radagast.
He hardly appears in the books, does he?
He's not in The Hobbit, no. I doubt he was even invented then. He's a Lord of the Rings creation. But I don't know, perhaps I was just too old for Radagast. It is a children's film after all. And I thought, for me, he's just a bit too childish. But then I don't know what I was really thinking, because he's not that much different in the books either, or any book that he appears in, which I think is just Lord of the Rings. He's not in the Silmarillion. unless he's actually just mentioned.
Yes.
I don't think he's in any of the poems, although I stand to be corrected.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sylvester McCoy, he's a bit out there as a character. He's a bit mad. I think Sylvester McCoy plays him faithfully there, but it's just one of those characters that wasn't really for me.
Yeah.
Or I didn't get used enough to him. Maybe after the third film, I'd like him a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly Peter Jackson's a bit of a Doctor Who fan, because he wanted both Tom Baker and Sylvester McCoy in Lord of the Rings. In the first one, the Fellowship Ring. But I'm just imagining the scene between Gandalf and Saruman, when Saruman shows his evil intent, and just imagining if it was Christopher Lee versus Sean Connery rather than.
I imagine that. Yeah.
That would have been something, but
I mean, it was powerful enough as it is, but that would have been quite a sight.
Yes.
If they had given Sauron a human form, Sean Connery, perhaps as Sauron, could have played that role. I can't remember if he takes on a human form or if he's able to by Lord of the Rings.
Beginning, when he's supposedly killed in battle at the beginning.
Yeah, well, that's the second age, when he is embodied. But after then, this is something I think that comes up on the Tolkien Society's Facebook page from time to time.
Yes.
Does he have a human form? I can never remember. I think maybe he does, but again, I'd need to look that up. But Sean Connery he would have been able to play that part. He would have the gravitas and the threat in his voice, I think. I think he could have done that if they'd gone in that direction.
Yes.
Or even as Denethor, to be honest. Although maybe he's a bit too big, tall for that part.
What do you...
I don't know. I'd be a rubbish casting director.
I remember once, out of sheer boredom, I was watching after I saw the film version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah.
I try to imagine if Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the original series with Alec Guinness, was a big Hollywood film in 1979, who would play all the other characters aside from Alec Guinness, who, of course, in that film version would still be Smile. And I found myself giving it, obviously, things like that, you end up making it an all-star cast and giving all the big names, all the parts. But I remember I ended up casting Peter Sellers in my mind as Toby Easterhouse, which is...
Toby. Yeah, okay.
Which it did me, and I did cast Sean Connery as Peter Gilliam. And what I thought was a stroke of genius, I cast Roger Moore as Bill Hayden. Because you could...
No. Let's recant, Paul. No, he'd be too nice for that. Not nearly smarmy enough.
But that would be the whole point. It would be like...
No, this is the 70s generation of casting Colin Firth as Hayden. No, why did they do that? Why would you even do that? Colin Firth. I was very upset.
But the whole point about Bill Hayden is you're meant to find him genial and likable.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
That adds to the... But I get your point. But with the film, which aspects of the Fellowship of the Ring do you really enjoy? What do you see as working in that film?
Everything that happens in Hobbiton, I loved. Such a strong opening.
Yes.
So those are some of my favorite scenes there, up to they get to Bree. Yeah. And it doesn't turn bad then, but I'm particularly fond of the Hobbiton part. Everything's so lovely and peaceful and Edwardian. I kind of like that literary age. Rivendell is pretty nice. We're not there long enough, unfortunately. The March to Rivendell, actually, that's handled pretty well as well. I'm not a big fan. Okay, so this is the the lover of the book coming in. If I'd directed it, I would not have had Arwen having the role she did. I would have kept Glorfindel. However, it's the year 2000, and you don't have your Peter Jackson, and you want to beef up the role of women in it. So I understand why he went in that direction. And of course, he's got enough characters already hanging around, and Arwen's going to appear later. Glorfindel won't. But I would have still kept him. I love the scene with Arwen on the other side of the river, the name of which I forget, when the Black Riders are on the other side and they're about to try and come over, but the waves come and unhorse them. Gandalf's magic trick. That's a really great scene. I'm also exceptionally fond of the scenes on the Anduin. Pardon me, on the canoes. And my most favorite scene in the whole trilogy is the big statues, which I've got here, of Isildur and Anarion. These two guys.
Oh.
I can't remember which one this guy is. And that's, I think, actually Bearded Dude is Isildur.
Yes.
So I got those in the extended edition when they came out. They're a bit chipped and a bit worn, but they're still there. So that was my most favorite scene of all. Seeing the wide angle, the canoes looking very small, coming up to these mighty statues. And that's one scene, if I read the book, I don't mind thinking of the film. Because it's such a great visual representation. So if I had a top three parts that really worked for me, the whole of Hobbiton, or the Shire section, and the canoes going down the Anduin and stopping at the Rauros Falls, and the two statues. And I love their name, and I've completely forgotten it. The Argonath. They're called the Argonath. That scene. And I think the third, I'm not sure. Moria is a possibility, but the special effects are a little dated there, especially when they're going down the stairs just before the Borvog appears. Those special effects on the non-4K version, I assume they're dusted up. Look a bit dated. Perhaps I think I'll leave that one open. Well, Orthanc is very good. It's handled really well. But there's nothing that looks bad. The only scene that I don't know if I'm going to anticipate you here, that I think possibly doesn't work very well right from the beginning, is Galadriel when she's tempted by the ring. They changed the camera or the filter or whatever they're using for cinematography for it. And I get very nervous when I see that, especially if I happen to be with someone else, that they're going to laugh at it because it looks so odd and almost comic.
I don't think that scene works generally. That aspect of that scene works at all. It would have been better. Well, I don't mean just the visuals. I mean the dialogue, the Hobbit. It would have been better. I know they need to show that that Frodo has this ring because he has to, not because he's any less tempted on. But they need to show that this ring can be the undoing of anyone on Middle Earth, and they mean anyone. But they already kind of showed that slightly also with Gandalf. When Gandalf is in both the book and in the film, Gandalf is horrified when Frodo's like, "Why don't you have the ring? Why don't you do it?" And he's like, "Don't tempt me."
That's a very cleverly done scene, isn't it? When he seems to grow and everything gets dark. That is really well done. And I'm just there with Bilbo in Rivendell when he's tempted again by the ring, when he has that awful.
Oh,
Uh,
that's almost
yeah,
terrifying, isn't it? Because he's
yeah, it's on the right side of silly and absolutely terrifying, and
yeah,
it's the terrifying side. And I fear, although, as with a lot of fears, um, it's never actually happened. If I see Galadriel and there's someone else with me, I'm worried they're just going to laugh at it because it just looks on the wrong side of terrifying. But it's not happened yet, and it's the scene that I like least, just because of the visuals. The narrative is fine. It's from the book, so it has to be.
mm,
But it works irrespective of that. It's just the visual part of that I'm not fond of.
yeah,
But it's made up by everything happening around it,
mm,
um, particularly the Shire and Argonath and the Falls.
mm,
And yeah, so those two are definitely my favourite scenes. The third place, I think, would be a runoff, a tiebreak between any number of other scenes, except in the one we just mentioned with Galadriel.
yeah.
But yeah, how about you?
I don't. I like the scene with the Rivendell. I always look back on. I like the Hobbit scene beginning. Like you, it's like I almost want one of those Hobbit houses.
Yes, absolutely.
It's basically Peter Jackson has property porn and a fantasy film at the same time. It's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm surprised. I mean, Saturday Night Live last week, a few days ago, did actually a comedy sketch about the whole thing of property porn and people looking at all this. But and it was funny but predictable. But if they ever do a follow up, they ought to do one on. No, probably not given the tone SNL did, but someone ought to do a comedy sketch of people doing Escape to the Country or something like that, where you're in Hobbiton and you're looking at, or the Shire, and you're looking at all these various Hobbit
Yeah.
type houses to live in, and
Or if you want to jump forward slightly to Two Towers,
yeah,
remember, I think you actually see a clip of this in Fellowship,
yeah,
of orcs attacking farms in Rohan. And in the second film, you see them all going off to, you have the two kids, the two children, their mother sends them away
yes.
to Helm's Deep. So perhaps Saturday Night Live should do Escape to Helm's Deep.
I
All
know
these lovely farmhouses, but oh, here come orcs, we've got to go.
they did. They actually did a comedy sketch on The Hobbit. I think when the first one came out, of Peter Jackson's doing this one, and it's going to be extended to 20 films.
Yeah,
So a
yeah.
whole film in set parts of that set in Rivendell, a whole part of it because of the way he dragged. I mean, if I remember reading it, was it the first 60 or the first 80 pages made a 2.5 hour film of the first of the Hobbits?
Oh, I can't remember now when it finishes. I would have to watch it again.
Yeah,
Yeah, um, with all the puffing and padding that it has, it's
yes.
one loses one's place.
And also they had what was I going to say? They going back to what we are discussing over my favourite bits. I do like sorry, I just changed from there. The scene with the where the fellowship begins.
Uh-huh.
All the way through until Boromir, and I feel nothing
Oh,
quite gets as good as that. There are moments, there are brilliant moments in the Two Towers and the Return of the King, but I think nothing gets as close as that
you
actual
mean
bit in the film, The Fellowship,
when they're about to leave Rivendell?
when they leave the whole thing up
Yeah.
until Gandalf having the seemingly being killed, when he falls off the pathway in Helm's Deep to his death. Also, the death of Boromir. I think once it gets to that, it never gets. hits those high notes. It's like watching a band who've been around for decades.
Mm.
It's still wonderful. They still do great music. You will always love them, but nothing beats those classic hits that they did. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, I think that would be my third choice for brilliant scene. Aragorn and Arwen on the bridge.
Yeah.
Such a lovely romantic moment. The book, on a very personal level,
Yeah.
you've identified one of the most scenes that is closest to my heart in all of literature. Tolkien describes Aragorn when everyone's assembling prior to leaving. He's one, I think Frodo perhaps sees him sitting on some steps, not head in hands, but bowed down. And he says words to the effect that no one but Aragorn knew what this moment meant for him. And I've bowdlerized it. Tolkien writes it much, much better. But that just hits me straight in the heart. Whenever I'm at the dentist or at the doctor or anything like that, I think, yeah, now I know I don't know what Aragorn felt like, but I think of myself, no one here knows what this moment means for me except, well, God probably. I've got to get my teeth done or I'm feeling unwell.
Yes.
But it's a very special scene, that one for me. I love it very, very much. But in the film, they don't really play that. But instead we get Aragorn and Arwen on the bridge, which is such a lovely, it's shot so beautifully. Yeah, I like that one a lot as well. That scene a lot as well.
It is. It's a tremendous film, and I think it's a richly deserved film. In that it got the accolades it deserved. I mean, Ian McKellen. Sorry, I just suddenly realised my laptop needs charging. Ian McKellen got an Oscar nomination for the first film, Best Supporting Actor.
Right. Okay.
I believe it had some nominations in The Return of the King. Had some Oscar nominations as well, but
it cleaned up. It won a bucket load.
Yes.
Return of the King. I don't know if the others won any Oscars, but yeah, Return of the King, first fantasy film, I think, to do so well.
Yes.
Yeah.
To say the least, but it's and much deserved. But it still feels. I mean, going back to what we said at the start of it, 20 years. It does feel bizarre that it's lasted so long.
It's the film, 20 years old. It doesn't feel it, which is a testament to the production values, the high production values. We can, if one is thinking as a critic, one can criticize it until quite worthily, till the cows come home, and that's fine. But it's just cinema fans. It's such wonderful fare. It's such a solid adventure story, and one, well, I don't know if it's unique, but it's perhaps it's special because it didn't bow to Hollywood conventions. That would have been to introduce a raft of new characters and really strip away the essential values of the books, which I think the film, at least it tries to keep. I think that if it had gone the Hollywood path, its evocation of the battle between good and evil would have been much different than it actually was in the film. It would have been the borders between them would have been much more blurred. And so, yeah, it was special from that point of view as well. And they went onwards and upwards with the next two films as well. I think Return of the King is a better film. Yeah, I do.
I think the end of the Return of the King is a bit protracted, because that's one criticism.
Well, I understand why people think it is. It isn't for me.
Yes.
I would have been quite happy to have the hobbits go back to the Shire for the Scouring.
Yes.
But I'm speaking as a a massive Tolkien fan here.
Yes.
But I can understand when people say, "Oh no, it should have ended much earlier," for sure. But it compare, say, Return of the King to Godfather 3, or Return of the Jedi pictures.
Mm.
Those two, in particularly, were very weak on their third films.
Yes.
Although Star Wars made up for it by being so strong with its second. But yeah, 20 years. It's I feel I want to say that line that Bilbo says in the party. I've known it half as long as I've wanted to, and not as long as I ought to have done, and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's a testament to the film's value that we're here talking about it now.
It's been around,
and that
assuming neither of us live to be 100,
it's
been around for over a fifth of our lives.
Well, there's a thought. Yeah, thanks for that.
That's all right.
I guess it has been a fifth, and well-merited place it has in our lives as well. And it introduced so many people to Tolkien's works. I mean, by the end of the century, the 20th century, he was already in a really good place, Tolkien. He'd won several book polls on books of the century, or the book of the century, much to the annoyance of stuffy critics and the like, which is always good fun. And so his sales were brilliant. But nevertheless, this film brought a load of new people in to love the film, the franchise, and the books as well. And so the rise of social media has just increased that support, which is great. The more people read Tolkien, whether or not they move on to serious literature later or stay with him or whatever, doesn't matter. The films are very worthy in their own right, and they've drawn people in to Tolkien's books, Middle-earth and beyond. And I give it all praise for that, and gratitude as well. Yeah, the fact that we're here seriously discussing it. There aren't many films that get that honor. So many films are released, but the number that you're talking about, 5, 10, let alone 20 years later, I imagine it's quite small. And Lord of the Rings is one of them. And I'm sure next year, the year after, you'll be doing Two Towers, Return of the King instead, which would be entirely justified.
That is a good idea. That's a good idea to do that, and I will certainly bear that in mind, because I've been doing these live stream discussions after I did a coverage of the US election night, and that was popular enough for me to think I need to do a few live stream discussions. So I did some on American politics. I've done one on the coronavirus and Christmas, which I didn't have Christmas. I'm doing these monthly ones with Andrew Allison, who's a right-wing libertarian, where I'm sort of
slightly not.
we politically disagree with each other a lot, but we get along. So we have these, we're planning these monthly discussions where we see how much we disagree and or agree on certain subjects. So I got that. I've also done a discussion on as I mentioned, I did one with Lisa Funnell on the 4 actors who in Bond, who died last year. So I'm hoping to do, it's going to be mainly political live stream discussions, but I'm hoping to occasionally branch out. I tend to see Mars Hill as a bit of a magazine format. So you've got your politics and your current affairs, which I refer to, but occasionally you will have any sort of feature sections on other things.
Splendid, yeah. Will you do anything more Bond related in the future?
I want to. I want to. Trouble is, it's getting hold of people to have these discussions.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't think I'm that well known within the online community on Bond to merit some of that. I mean, I had the discussion with Lisa Fennell. I've been trying to get Mark O'Connell several times. I've asked Kelvin Dyson a couple of occasions. It's timing. I'd love to do more. I've got it in my head, ideas I want to do. I had a wonderful idea this morning of having a discussion on the Bond film A View to a Kill, because I noticed some have fans among but when it came to, I discovered hours later someone had already done a podcast on that very
Let that stop
recently.
you.
Well, it was done very recently. If it had been done about a year or two ago, I would have probably thought, yeah, that'll be it. But to do a discussion on the appreciation of A View to a Kill, just days after someone else does feel,
Yeah.
So, or weeks even. So, I would love to do more Bond, but it's
maybe keep it until the new film finally comes out, and do something special then.
Which everyone else will do, but yes, that's an idea. And if anything happens in the meantime, it should. And I also want to do one on Guinness World Records, because it's the 65th year. But it's trying to think who to invite and what the format would be.
Yeah.
And the questions. So sometimes you can have plenty of brilliant ideas, and they never. When you start to write it down, you realise it's either a yay or a nay,
Right.
or maybe.
Okay.
But thank you so much, Malcolm, for this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
That's okay. It's good to see you again. Actually, it's strange because, of course, we knew each other before the film, so now we've known each other for over 20 years, which...
Yeah, my mum asked me today when I told her about this.
Yeah.
How do you know Paul? I said, well, we met on the C.S. Lewis board, Into the Wardrobe.
Yes.
And I think, was that 95, 96?
97, and we met in 98.
98.
We first met in 98. We knew each other before then, but that was when we first met. So we've known each other for about 25 years.
Yeah.
And we actually, first time we had a face-to-face conversations, coming up to 23 years.
Right. But yeah, so when was Into the Wardrobe then?
That was during my university years and a bit after.
Yeah, so perhaps that's 95 or 6-ish.
Yeah. I was on an email group called Mia Lewis as well.
Mia Lewis, was I on that? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I was, okay. Into the Wardrobe I remember well, but Mia Lewis, the name is vaguely familiar.
The thing about the Into the Wardrobe is it got me, one time I gave a talk outside local area, was in Belfast by C.S. Lewis Centennial Group, just because of a paper I wrote for the website.
Yeah.
And it was also indirectly how I got to know Liz Evershed.
Oh, really?
Because I knew a Catherine Hodson, or Catherine Blesson as she now is.
Right.
We met, of course, you know, but it was through her that I met Liz Evershed.
Right.
And all these other friends have sort of passed by. Not that I don't think any less of that. It's just the way things have happened. You
move on. That's how it is. Yeah.
You sort of on touch on Facebook. Well, you see each other on Facebook, but hardly in touch.
Yeah.
But of course, Liz being the wonderful person she is.
Yes, the best of us.
Yeah, as the rest of it, we've remained in touch. So yes, it's
excellent. I had a love-hate, or not hate, but a love-dislike relationship with Into the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
It got a bit hot sometimes on the religion board.
Yeah.
And at that time, right, let's just walk away for a while and then come back. But it was some good times there.
That was partly, I think, to do with the fact that Lewis sort of transcends theological cultures. And of course, it's also a lot of Americans on Into the Wardrobe, and it's You know, as we know with the politics lately, America is a very unique country. But
Has something been happening?
well,
I joke.
I know it was that split second of, oh my God, does he know? And then it was like, oh, you know, that split second between genuinely thinking and then realizing that you know the whole.
And you know what? It's being replicated a bit at the moment because there's a C.S. Lewis page on Facebook.
Yes,
that I'm a member of, and that just has the same old strife that I think we had in the past. It's like watching the other day, Valentine's Day was A Room with a View. And at the end, Lucy Honeychurch and her husband, whose name I forget,
yes,
they're back in Florence and they're round the table at the Pensione.
yes.
And they see another young girl and her chaperone. And they're saying exactly the same thing as our Lucy, Helena Bonham Carter, did at the start of the film. It's a cyclical thing. And it's the same with this message board. This group on Facebook that people are getting wound up by politics and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, scroll on.
Well, I won't go into it here because we're discussing this in public, but the whole Trump thing, I've lost friendships with that and acquaintanceships, and you know, it's in the world we
you're right. Yeah. Well, you know, in the manner of Lewis and Tolkien, I think we just pray for reconciliation.
Yes.
Leave it up to God, and keep trying to do our own best.
Yeah.
As often as much as we're able. That's what I think what Tolkien and Lewis would have done.
They were clearly two of a kind in 20th century fantasy fiction, and it'll be a very long while before we see anything of their like again. But thank you so much, Malcolm, for this discussion. And
okay, thank you.
Very enjoyable. And I have been looking online to see if anyone's left any comments, and no one has. But actually, there is one from Liz Evershed.
Oh.
I hope she won't mind me sharing this. She said, "I was wondering when Alexander the Great would get a mention, and it took 22 minutes."
I think I was very restrained.
You were wonderfully restrained, but I wouldn't have minded in the slightest if you.
Well, if you ever want to branch out further into classical history and a show on Alexander the Great, then I'm here. I'm free. I'm here all week.
Yeah.
Or Narnia, for that matter, if you want to talk about Lion and the Witch.
Yes.
Or Lewis in general. I'll stake a claim for that if there's no one else about.
I do have a list of people I'd love to discuss future subjects in, and you're definitely on that list. But yes, thank you so much, Malcolm.
Okay, thank you.
I hope to catch up with you soon.
Will do. Okay.
God bless you.